Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, honorable ministers, good morning. I would like to thank you all for attending the conference and this pledging session. Please have your seats. Enjoy, it's going to be a good show. Media freedom, a core pillar of functioning democracy, is in global decline, hastened by repressive laws introduced during the COVID-19 pandemic. The world continues to be an unsafe place for journalists. According to Reporters Without Borders, the year 2021 counted a record number of journalists, 488, being detained around the world, with another 65 being held hostage. Nearly one journalist a week, on average, is still being killed in connection with their work. This pledging event will draw together commitments to improve the situation of media freedom and safety of journalists. This session will also build a link with the US-led initiative Summit for Democracy, being one of Estonia's contributions made during the opening summit in December 2021. We will first listen to two keynote speeches. First by Her Excellency, Liisa Peterson, the Acting Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor from the United States, and His Excellency Lord Ahmad of Wimbledon, Minister of State of the United Kingdom, as previous co-chair of the Media Freedom Coalition. After the keynote speeches, we will have a panel with esteemed professionals, and thereafter, we invite the Media Freedom Coalition foreign ministers, as well as other participants of the conference, to present their own commitments. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Her Excellency Ms. Liisa Peterson, America's Acting Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor. Please.
Secretary General Vseviov, distinguished ministers, panelists, and guests, good morning to those of you who are here in Tallinn, and greetings to those joining us online from around the world. I want to start by thanking the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Estonian Institute of Human Rights for hosting the third Global Conference for Media Freedom. I'm particularly grateful for the opportunity to highlight the critical link between this conference and the first Summit for Democracy the United States hosted in December, where President Biden made clear the urgent need to increase support to independent media. At the first summit, we encouraged governments to make concrete financial and political commitments to bolster independent media. We also urged renewed support for the Media Freedom Coalition and underscored the importance of collective action through multilateral and multi-stakeholder efforts to promote media freedom and the safety of journalists. These efforts are critical for two reasons familiar to those joining this session, but that bear repeating. First, the work of independent media is critical to the ability of citizens to make informed decisions about their daily lives and to hold their governments accountable. Journalists throughout the world shine a light on abuses and violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms, expose corruption, inequality, and injustice, and support free and fair elections. Journalists' contributions are essential for strengthening democratic institutions and fostering resilient societies that are peaceful, prosperous, and inclusive. A free and robust independent media is vital to making continuing progress toward the three shared goals of the summit: supporting democracy and defending against authoritarianism, fighting corruption, and promoting respect for human rights domestically and abroad. Second, media freedom is increasingly challenged and threatened globally. Journalists and media organizations face intimidation, harassment, and violence, as well as economic and legal challenges that seriously impede their ability to work freely and safely. The threats and challenges are complex and ever-evolving, and the impact is particularly dire on populations that lack access to reliable, objective news reporting and investigative journalism. With the proliferation of disinformation and misinformation, access to well-sourced and fact-checked reporting has never been more important. Challenged to remain financially viable, many independent media outlets shut down, consolidate, or are co-opted by government or corporate entities. In many places where independent media outlets remain, pressure and threats from government and non-governmental actors lead to self-censorship as journalists refrain from objective reporting on critical issues of public interest. The tactics used against journalists and media outlets include withholding advertising, costly civil lawsuits, criminal prosecution under vaguely defined laws, and blocking social media accounts and websites. Both the challenges and the threats have worsened during the global COVID-19 pandemic, which some governments have used as a pretext to increase repression. In a series of investigative reports published by the Pegasus Project last year, we learned of an emerging threat involving the use of military-grade spyware to target at least 200 journalists from 24 countries around the world. The list continues to grow, and this threat not only has a negative impact on journalists' safety and reporting, it may also add a financial burden on media outlets, which need to bolster their digital security. Earlier this year, we released guidance with suggestions for steps journalists could take to reduce the risk of spyware. The United States thanks governments who made summit commitments related to media freedom, such as pledging to fund key initiatives, strengthen domestic institutions related to media freedom, and to promote journalists' safety online. We also commend those who have made commitments in other ways, including through joining the Media Freedom Coalition and actively engaging in its work. And we are grateful to countries like Austria for its commitment to host an international conference on media freedom to underline that every democracy needs a vibrant, free, and independent media. We will look to these and other key forums to carry forward the momentum created at the first summit and drive progress in what we're calling the Year of Action leading to the second Summit for Democracy. Therefore, we are especially grateful to Estonia for organizing this pledging session as part of its conference. For some, this is a key opportunity to affirm commitments made at the summit and elsewhere. For others, this is a chance to make new pledges to defend media freedom. At the first summit, President Biden led by the power of example, announcing in his presidential initiative for democratic renewal a robust package of initiatives to support free and independent media over the next 2 years. Under the presidential initiative, USAID will provide up to $30 million to the International Fund for Public Interest Media, a new multi-donor fund designed to enhance the independence, development, and sustainability of independent media, especially in resource-poor and fragile settings. Additionally, USAID will provide up to $5 million to launch a media viability accelerator, which will improve the financial viability of independent media outlets in both underdeveloped and more developed media markets. To guard the essential work of journalism from spurious legal claims aiming to silence legitimate work, USAID will provide up to $9 million to support a global defamation defense fund for journalists, which will offer liability coverage to investigative reporters and their organizations. In parallel, the State Department will provide up to $3.5 million to establish a journalism protection platform. The platform will provide at-risk journalists with digital and physical security training, psychosocial care, legal aid, and other forms of assistance. And the United States will increase its engagement with the Media Freedom Coalition. Before closing, I want to express appreciation to the United Kingdom for conceiving the idea of a global campaign for media freedom to bolster existing efforts, for convening the first global conference with Canada in 2019, and for launching the Media Freedom Coalition and key initiatives that have added to the array of platforms and tools the international community can use to advance media freedom. We appreciated the UK's leadership during your term as MFC co-chair, and we look forward to continuing our collaboration with you in the executive group and as co-chair of the Working Group on Media Sustainability. Now I look forward to hearing the insights and recommendations of our distinguished expert panel. The United States recognizes that a whole-of-society approach is necessary to effectively respond to the pressing challenges and threats faced by independent media. That's why President Biden invited a broad cross-section of stakeholders to the summit to leverage government collaboration with key non-government stakeholders to help ensure meaningful progress on summit objectives. We look forward to working with you all in the year of action. We must make progress on implementing commitments that enable journalists to work free from harassment, intimidation, and violence, and that bolster the resilience of media organizations to economic challenges. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that injustice and corruption will never be transformed by keeping them hidden, but only by bringing them out into the light and confronting them. Every step forward for democratic development and respect for human rights, from the abolition of the global slave trade to the civil rights movement in the United States, has relied on those who bring out the truth. We have the opportunity and the obligation to ensure that these truth tellers are able to continue their invaluable work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Assistant Secretary, and thank you for America's leadership and for highlighting the numerous initiatives that the United States government undertakes to safeguard freedom of the media and democracy. And now it is my honor to give the floor to His Excellency, Lord Ahmad of Wimbledon, the Minister of State of the United Kingdom, the previous co-chair of the Media Freedom Coalition, for the second keynote.
Jonathan, thank you. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may I join in the chorus of acknowledgement but also deep gratitude to Estonia for hosting us again at this very important of issues on putting media freedom at the heart of our work. And I wish to acknowledge right from the outset our strong partnership with countries across the globe and the 50-strong coalition that has now been built on this important priority. Your Excellencies, some facts. 9 journalists were killed in January alone, January of this year. 9 journalists who knew the risks they were taking, yet still pressed on whilst reporting. Why? To expose the truth, to defend freedom of speech, a very essence, indeed fundamental, to the democracies that we all defend, that we all represent. And these 9 were not unusual when it came to journalists, because all around the world, incredibly brave, courageous reporters, women and men, are being intimidated, attacked, and killed. Indeed, notwithstanding the COVID-19 lockdowns that took place around the world, more than 50 lost their lives last year. I remember in August and in the lead up to the takeover of Kabul by the Taliban, seeing as town after town, city after city fell. There weren't just alarm bells going off. It was very obvious that freedoms were being suppressed. Why? Because repeatedly and tragically, we saw the voice of journalists, Afghan journalists, and particularly women journalists in Afghanistan, not just being stifled, but being eradicated, being eliminated altogether. And they paid the ultimate price of their own life. Therefore, it's all up to you, and it's great to see so many friends from across the field in all sectors, but most importantly, from across the field of journalism itself, who are represented here. Because this isn't an action which governments can take sitting in an office within their respective capital. It needs to be informed by the people who know best. We were asked a question yesterday about the role of civil society in the press conference the Foreign Minister and I did. And in that, it was very clear to me, and I've learnt this over many years, indeed, it's reflective of the way any inclusive democracy should work, that the role of civil society, the role of the very people you are seeking to protect, is intrinsic to your program and policy. There is so much more to be done, but if I may, just take a moment, let us all remember those journalists. Let us remember those people who give their lives simply for doing their job, to stand up for the very freedoms we all hold dear to our heart. And that is why that moment of reflection, that poignancy of the loss of lives, that is why the United Kingdom government is deeply committed to championing the freedom of the media. And I'm grateful for the kind words from the United States in acknowledging our role. But inception is one thing. Developing an idea is the next stage. Sustaining the idea, the very initiative, is perhaps arguably the most challenging of all. We all know the world moves on from conflict to conflict, from challenge to challenge. Yet it is incumbent of all of us in this room and way beyond to ensure this important principle of democracy is kept at the forefront of the global community's minds. We only need to look across our television screens, read a newspaper, to be informed by the incredible work that journalists do, and the independent media as well, which is often stressed, and rightly so. Through the plethora of social media now, we see reporting by people who perhaps haven't been trained in the fraternity of journalists, but at the same time, they are doing that important thing, seeking to inform, to expose the suppression of freedom of speech and freedom of reporting. We've been extremely honored to have deep working partnerships with people from across the Media Freedom Coalition, but not just country partners, but from the journalists directly themselves. And therefore, I'm delighted as we hand over the co-chairmanship of this coalition. We are delighted we are handing over to the hands of the Netherlands. We heard the focus, we heard the passion of the Foreign Minister from the Netherlands yesterday in terms of the Netherlands' commitment as a global leader on media freedom. And our support for media freedom will remain unwavering. But equally, our support for the Media Freedom Coalition is also unwavering. And we are bolstering our support in a variety of different areas. First and foremost, this includes using our diplomatic clout to develop local networks at country level. And I've said before, that's also about your own backyard, what's happening at home. And through our National Action Plan, I say once again, we stand ready to help every country as part of this coalition to share our experience and insights in the development of our own National Action Plan on media freedom for the United Kingdom. We believe these actions will help the coalition to respond rapidly to the violations of media freedom and call them out. We're also co-chairing the working group on media development to boost the outlets themselves in terms of their resilience and their ability to perform on the ground, allowing them not to just survive, but thrive. We also value greatly the work of our expert colleagues, who I met again this morning, the high-level legal panel. Their reports have challenged us, yes, but equally they have helped us shape our laws and our policies in support of media freedom. And I also know their future work will help further this cause. and we will consider their reports, as we always do, most carefully, and recommend action and practical application through our own networks. The Global Media Defence Fund is another hugely important strand of work. The United Kingdom has already pledged £3 million to this fund, which has supported more than 1,700 journalists. And as I said yesterday, by the time the allocations are done on the current funding round, over 3,000 journalists around the world would have been supported through this important technical and financial support. And we are grateful for our relationship with UNESCO in this regard. But we will continue to back it and encourage others to do so. Last year, under our G7 presidency, the UK secured commitments from foreign ministers, not just within the G7, but others invited to attend, to stand up for reporters around the world. And we are working hand in glove with our great friends and partners, the United States, on the Democracy Summit to ensure how we can strengthen, coordinate, and collaborate on this important initiative taken forward. We will carry on pushing media freedom as a top priority for the international community. This also means that action, when it needs to be taken, and indeed the high-level panel have produced a report to this effect, it means using the global human rights sanctions to hold to account those involved in serious violations or abuses included against members of the media. At home in the UK, I've alluded to our National Action Plan. We fully accept. This isn't about preaching or teaching from a Western, developed, established democracy. It's how we live and learn from each other. But we must also make sure that our own National Action Plan means that we accept in principle, but also in reality, that the defense of media and journalists, indeed broadly human rights as a whole, is never a job which can ever be claimed to be completed, no matter how developed your democracy, no matter how inclusive and advanced your society. And of course, we will keep speaking at every opportunity in support of this particular cause. Our commitment in terms of our support to the Secretariat, which helps to ensure that this coalition continues to function, is extremely important. And we will continue to back that particular Secretariat through direct funding. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, defending journalists is not one of the things we should be doing. It should be pivotal to what we should be doing. And when I'm often asked the question, why do you do it? There's a simple answer. Because it is simply the right thing to do. And for ultimately, if we all reflect for a moment, tomorrow, if the papers didn't exist, if we didn't have journalists challenging us, reporting on activities, there may be some in the world who actually quite favor it. They won't be challenged by having awkward questions, challenging questions, being held to account for things you have said and indeed things you plan to do. Now, some would argue that would lead to a world where they feel happier, particularly those who serve in public life, particularly governments of certain ilks around the world. But you know what? Journalists are intrinsic to who we are, what we are. Without their courageous frontline reporting, would we see the extent of the human suffering in certain parts of the world? The short answer is no. Journalists get access to parts of the world through their own courageous networks, through their own tenacity, which others cannot achieve, not governments, not international agencies. Often they are reporting on the tragedy unfolding before governments have acted, and it is vital that link is sustained and strengthened. Now is the time for us to commit and come together. Now is the time for us to collaborate and collectively act. Now is the time to redouble our efforts, intensify our support. And I can assure you of this much, that my country, the United Kingdom, which defends media freedom, which has its own challenges, I accept, but this rich diversity of our communities, the rich tapestry of what defines the modern, progressive, inclusive United Kingdom. The kind of freedoms and liberties which are enjoyed, the kind of challenges and opportunities which exist mean we strengthen our democracy. But intrinsic to all of that is that we have a free, active, progressive, and yes, challenging media to us, but a media of which we are proud. Because ultimately, it is the media, it is those brave journalists who seek to do their job. But in doing so, they also ensure that the truth is told. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lord Ahmad. Thank you for these powerful messages. And the United Kingdom is handing over the co-chair position to the Netherlands, but listening to your powerful messages, it is absolutely clear that the United Kingdom will remain a leader in defending media freedom and indeed democracy globally. So thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're moving on to the panel. If I may ask the panelists to join me on the stage. And in order to conserve time and give you as much substance as we possibly can, I'll keep the introductions to the minimum, and we'll move right on to listening to this esteemed group of experts. We'll be looking for recommendations from you as we're getting ready for the pledges later. Your recommendations will now be obviously extremely interesting, not only to me, but also to all those who have hopefully prepared their pledges later on. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to give the floor for a brief intervention to Mr. Guilherme Canela de Sousa Godoy, who is the Chief of Section for Freedom of Expression and Safety of Journalists at UNESCO. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Good morning, everyone. We heard a lot about the challenges freedom of expression and safety of journalists is facing. So I won't repeat the numbers of killings, the numbers of digital attacks, the different challenges related to disinformation, to surveillance, etc. I will talk about some hope in this story. Hope that we heard last year with the Nobel Peace Prize to journalism. But also, if we look 30 years back when the Windhoek Declaration was first endorsed and approved, and these words, free, independent, and pluralistic media, is now in our vocabulary, thanks to those pioneers, some of them are here in this room, we have advanced a lot. And that year, we have only 12 countries with freedom of information laws. Now we have 130 countries with freedom of information laws. 30 years later, we have a UN plan of action on safety of journalists. We have included freedom of information and safety of journalists in the Sustainable Development Goals, and so on and so forth. This has generated networks of investigative journalists. You remember Panama Papers, of civil society organizations, many of them present here today, of lawyers, of judges, of prosecutors, of police investigators, of electoral managerial bodies, all of them interested in some way or another to protect freedom of expression. All those gains, unfortunately, are being threatened today. So actually the pledge is how we keep these alive. UNESCO started a project, initiative 8 years ago for capacity building of judges and prosecutors. And 7 years later, we have engaged 23,000 judges and prosecutors. This is good news. I mean, judges and prosecutors are interested in learning about freedom of expression and safety of journalists. But how we keep this sustainable, how we keep this alive, how we support those men and women, judges and prosecutors and police officers to keep fighting impunity in crimes against journalists, to keep fighting SLAPPs, to keep fighting laws that are on the name of addressing issues like fake news are undermining freedom of expression everywhere. So the Global Media Defense Fund, in the case of UNESCO, is a concrete instrument for that, but is beyond this. The entire United Nations system, under the umbrella of the UN Plan of Action on Safety of Journalists and the issue of impunity, that this year is celebrating its 10th anniversary, and thanks to Austria, we are going to have a big discussion at the end of the year about that. We need to discuss what is the horizon of this. And for that, we do think we need to acknowledge the achievements we have reached so far. We have created all those networks, not UNESCO, all of us here, and now they are waiting for us. They are waiting for our further support. And UNESCO, obviously, is absolutely ready to interact with all of you to do this and to move forward. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. We've been spending these 1.5 days now talking a lot about the dire straits and the gloomy situation. Thank you for reminding us that there is hope on the horizon and that the pledges actually matter. Now, let me turn to Mr. James Dean, the co-founder and acting head of International Fund for Public Interest Media. Please.
So, the financial foundations on which media freedom rests are crumbling. They've been crumbling now for a decade, and they've been crumbling at an ever more accelerating rate. The COVID pandemic has accelerated even further the devastating loss in revenues characterizing independent media around the world. And independent journalism simply cannot survive if the institutions on which it rests simply go extinct. And this is an issue that UN Secretary General Guterres raised last year when he provided his own backing for the International Fund for Public Interest Media. And he said this: the international community can chart a path towards a new era of sustainable public interest journalism, whilst helping to restore trust across societies. I urge member states, donors, and others to support the International Fund for Public Interest Media as a vital new endeavor. His leadership was matched just at the end of last year by President Biden, as we've already heard, at the Democracy Summit, when he championed the idea of a new multilateral independent fund to support independent media around the world. A free and independent media, he said, is the bedrock of democracy. It's how publics stay informed and how governments are held accountable. We're committing critical seed funding to launch a new multilateral effort, the International Fund for Public Interest Media. And note that word, seed funding. The US is committing that funding up to $30 million, as we've heard, in expectation and through leadership of generating far greater resources to come from other governments, technology companies, and others. And this is what the International Fund is designed to do, is to mobilize and to deploy far more resources to support independent media around the world than currently exist, to make it easy for donors to scale up their support and to do it in a way that is legitimate, where the funds will be deployed to institutions in need through an independent governance mechanism with a board co-chaired by Maria Ressa, Nobel Peace Prize winner, director of Rappler, and by Mark Thompson, the former Chief Executive Officer, CEO of the New York Times and former Director General of the BBC. President Macron has lent his leadership to the fund as well. And I talked about that yesterday, together with Switzerland, which is also supporting it, Taiwan, Korea, New Zealand, and we're in discussion with 15 countries at least at the moment, as well as with other potential sources of income, to massively scale up support in this area with an initial target of raising $80 million. Maria Ressa, in a Nobel Peace Prize lecture, said, "We need to address the collapse in the advertising model for journalism. This is part of a reason I agreed to co-chair the International Fund. Right now, where journalism is under attack on all fronts, only 0.3% of ODA is spent. If we nudge that up to 1%, we can raise $1 billion a year for news organizations. That will be crucial for the global South." But this is the reality. In just recent years, the funding has been static. It's often a lot less than 0.3%. Many Media Freedom Coalition countries actually spend far less than even that small amount. So some countries, it's been declining, not increasing to match the scale of the threat. So my final quote, if you like, is also from the co-chairs in an article they wrote for the New York Times. "It will take more than speeches, or indeed Nobel Prizes, to save independent journalism. It will take a plan and a new, more equal partnership between practitioners and supporters in a prosperous North. It will also take hard cash. We really need to scale up support in this area."
Thank you, Mr. Dean. So there is hope on the horizon, and you reminded us now that in order to get to the horizon, we need to mobilize resources, and we need to do so through institutions in a structured way. Thank you. Allow me to now turn to Mr. Christophe Deloy, the Secretary General of Reporters Without Borders. Please.
Thank you. I will start by thanking Assistant Secretary Peterson and the Minister of State, Lord Ahmad, for their strong keynote speeches. And I want to really say how much we value these commitments and the ones of all the MFC members. I have a long list of suggestions and recommendations, so I will not make long comments. But just we are convinced at Reporters Without Borders, RSF, that it's crucial for the Media Freedom Coalition that it leads to structural change in the field of news and information, and that it helps democracies to be better protected. We are ready to provide the MFC with systemic solutions in order to create an ecosystem which can favor press freedom, editorial independence, pluralism, and trustworthiness of news and information. That's why we published 2 days ago a press release to develop the idea of a protection system for democratic public spaces, including a reciprocity mechanism with authoritarian regimes based on universal principles. This is new, this is creative, this is forward-looking. We want to discuss it with you. We suggest the MFC to host a specific discussion on this draft framework. We will circulate the concept paper upon request from democratic governments. What could governments do? 4 points. First one, partnership on information democracy. Governments could use the framework of the partnership to create a democratic digital space by coalescing democracies to implement their own principles in front of despotic regimes and private interests. Implement the recommendations developed by the working group co-chaired by Maria Ressa, the working group of the Forum on Information Democracy, on how to end infodemics. 250 recommendations are already on the table. Governments could also, in this framework, support the creation of the International Observatory for on the information and communication space, which will be the equivalent of the IPCC. Second point, governments could promote the New Deal for journalism, as recommended by the Forum on Information Democracy. It would consist, and will consist, in mobilizing global support for journalism based on the promotion of its practices and ethics. It will include a financial commitment in respective countries, but also towards the global south. We signed yesterday a MOU with the International Fund for Public Interest Media, which can be considered as the part of this New Deal. Third point, the Journalism Trust Initiative. States could pledge to distribute public funds to support media in a transparent and normative way. This should happen by applying self-regulatory standards that are developed, governed, and enforced by the journalistic community, such as the Journalism Trust Initiative. States could pledge to advance the principle of due prominence in legislation in order to facilitate elevated discoverability of trustworthy sources of information online, which can be identified by said standards. And stakeholders could pledge to incentivize the private sector, namely advertisers, platforms, I mean digital platforms and social networks, philanthropists, and other intermediaries to make use of trustworthiness indicators. Fourth point, and final point. You have heard about our efforts to establish a UN Special Representative for the protection of journalists, a protector of journalists at the UN. We call now for concrete support by states and the MFC itself for this mandate. It has been endorsed by the high-level panel. We call for implementation of this and the other recommendations from the panel's excellent report. A final conclusion about the US-led Summit for Democracy. We do believe that all those requests could lead to concrete deliverables for the year action plan of this summit, and we are willing to contribute to this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Listening to you, Mr. Deloy, I thought back to Lord Ahmad's keynote speech and when he talked about the importance of governments working together, but governments not being able to solve any of this alone. Us needing the ideas and proposals and support of the private sector and the academia and the NGOs. Thank you for your recommendations. We certainly cannot do it without you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me now please turn to Mrs. Zoe Titus, the Chair of Global Forum for Media Development, and the Director of the Namibia Media Trust. Please.
Thank you. Tera Pavas, Talinason, Romol. It's good to be in Talan. I thought it's important to acknowledge our host. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The GFMD's interventions have always been evidence-based. We take exceptional care to consult our membership. So my intervention will be very short, and thank you very much to the other panelists for articulating this issue so succinctly. So, as I said, my intervention will be short, if you would allow me to quote directly from a recent research and the three major highlights coming from our membership of over 100 members. And this is what our members have identified about the media support sector, or the most, well, top three issues, challenging issues identified about the media support sector. And that would be the issue of trust. Trust and recognition of professional journalists as credible information sources in both analog and digital worlds. The working environment for journalists, which has become incredibly hostile, especially for independent journalism. And thirdly, issues with securing funding and having the inability to diversify, diversify current revenue sources. So, I mean, those would be, in our view, the three main challenges at this time.
Thank you. Trust. I mean, to a large extent, this is what journalism, free media does. Keeping democracy together and alive by providing for trust between the people and the government. So thank you for highlighting that, Mrs. Titus. Let me now turn to Mr. Chan Yaginsu, the Deputy Chair of the high-level panel of legal experts on media freedom. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, you will recall that the Media Freedom Coalition was established 2 years ago, and it was established by reference to a call to action. A call to action in the face of a dire situation for media freedom. Regrettably, that situation has not improved, and as we've heard from the interventions from the United States, the United Kingdom, the need for solidarity and action has only grown more urgent. Yes, we live in a world in which we have two Nobel Peace Laureates who are journalists. That recognition is welcome. But these are two journalists who continue to be targeted because of the work they do. My friend and client, Maria Ressa, targeted by reference to criminal defamation laws. Dmitry Muratov, now targeted by reference to foreign agent laws. These are laws promulgated by states. 2 years ago, the Media Freedom Coalition established an independent advisory arm, the high-level panel of legal experts, Media Freedom, which I have the privilege to serve. 15 international lawyers, convened by the states, chaired by the Lord Neuberger of Abbotsbury, the former president of the UK Supreme Court, convened to advise, to provide concrete recommendations to action, to real commitment. In the past 2 years, we've been at work with two guiding principles. two guiding principles around two guiding questions. What can states do to better protect journalists and the independent media? And what can states do to hold to account, to punish those who will attack independent journalism, who will attack independent journalists? And we've produced, in our 2 years, a legal toolkit around those two principles. We've said when it comes to protection, the members of the Media Freedom Coalition can consider two areas by reference to their own existing international legal obligations. The first, protecting journalists, means getting them out of harm's way when they face imminent danger in their home state. We've called each state to commit to 50 emergency visas for journalists at imminent risk. We've provided other recommendations, this concept of safe refuge. We've also asked states to commit to protecting their own journalists abroad through robust diplomatic support if those journalists are arbitrarily detained or otherwise face abuse. That's protection, the toolkit for protection. What about accountability? What about punishment? Well, Christophe has already mentioned our work with our partners at RSF and our recommendation for an international standing body to independently investigate abuses. Lord Ahmed mentioned that 9 journalists had lost their lives in January. Well, 9 out of 10 journalist killings still continue to go unpunished. We must investigate, and the members of the Media Freedom Coalition must rally behind an independent investigative regime. The second point on punishment, and we've heard Lord Ahmed mention it already, targeted financial and travel sanctions. Now, Canada has already moved on safe refuge to give effect to our recommendations. The Dutch Parliament has already moved on an emergency visa. We look forward to hearing what other commitments the states are willing to sign up to. But I just want to reiterate this by way of closing. The panel is here to advise states, not just to write reports to all of the members of the Media Freedom Coalition, but to advise states individually as to how to give effect to our recommendations. It is our work, and we will continue to do this, to give the states the tools to show their commitment through their action, to back up their words and their laudable statements with their concrete deeds. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Yaginsu, and thank you for your concrete proposals. We have a number of governments in the room here. I hope we heard you. These are things that should be easy to implement, so we shall see. We shall see. Thank you. Finally, last but not least, I would like to turn to Mr. Jason Lambert, the Senior Director of Media Business from Internews. Please.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity. I have some slides which should be coming up on screen. Unfortunately, as we all know, in many places, increasingly, trusted independent local news media are vanishing. This collapse is due to fundamental changes in the media industry. In this digital age, technology giants are capturing the lion's share of ad revenue and protecting their market dominance by leveraging insights from the massive amounts of data they collect. Operating at far smaller scale without large data sets and algorithms to drive user engagement, local media find it much harder to keep up. They've been outcompeted for audiences, and they lack the insights to decide which business models to develop and adapt. So what can we do? Let's see. Okay, if we could advance next slide, please. What can we do? While our research shows that funding is sometimes necessary for some media acting in the public interest, we need long-term financial viability solutions for many more. We need strong, diverse media to represent and reach everyone. In addition to the programs we support globally and that we implement, I'll now introduce 2 market-driven solutions that we're working on at Internews. And you can see we're market-driven because we're trying to do slides, I guess. Next slide, please. Having worked with hundreds of media in the past 15 years, I can tell you it's very difficult to get hard evidence and clear predictive insights on how media companies survive. There are many types of media and country contexts, each combination presenting their own challenges and opportunities. To better compete for audiences and revenues, we need frameworks, we need lots of data, and we need to work together. Now, many of you will have heard of the USAID support for the Media Viability Accelerator announced at the Summit for Democracy. It was inspired by Internews research and the work of many others here and who have been joining this conference online. We have already mobilized a group of 10 expert partner organizations to help define a solution that gathers data, enables privacy-respecting analysis, makes recommendations, and brings media towards increased viability, faster than ever. We ask you to join us. Tell us how we can make media viability easier for you to support. Please write the Media Viability Accelerator into programs you fund, and please consider joining USAID in supporting the development and deployment of this groundbreaking initiative to bring new, viable business models to media. Finally, next slide, please. One subcomponent of the Media Viability Accelerator that we at Internews have been developing for the last 2 years is Ads for News, and we've done that in cooperation with the World Economic Forum. It's a growing list of trusted, independent news media now in 30 countries that we give to big brands and agencies so they can spend more money with good media while defunding disinformation and bad actors. Now, we and our industry partners have developed signals of trust, and we welcome initiatives like the Journalism Trust Initiative, which can help us to identify trusted media. Just recently, this is significant, and it shows how we bridge the gap between public and private, but we've been talking to Group M, the world's largest media investment firm, which allocates more than $36 billion per year in online advertising for its clients. It's now on board to target a percentage of ad revenue or ad spend being allocated towards trusted local news in the Asia-Pacific region. Now, even a small percentage increase will be a huge win for news, and now we need your help here to turn this pilot into a scalable global offering that will have great impact. So the tide can be turned. We don't give up on the markets, and we can encourage big brands, in this case, to join us and buy more ad space from local news.
Thank you. So there you have it. A number of ideas, concrete proposals. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking this panel. And we will now move on to the next stage, which is the commitments from governments. Thank you, panelists. As I said in my opening few minutes, we will now be first listening to live statements from governmental representatives who are in the room here with us today. After that, video statements. And remember, the commitments and pledges can be taken in various forms. They can be financial, advocacy, they could be policy actions. If you don't have a commitment today, you're always welcome to come up with one later. Without further ado, let me first give the floor to the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs from the Czech Republic, His Excellency Mr. Kozak, please.
Thank you. Honorable ministers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is my big pleasure to address this event on behalf of the Czech Republic. I will start by thanking the organizers for preparing this great opportunity to publicly renew our commitments and pledges to defend media freedom. Space for human rights, civil society and media freedom is shrinking in many countries. Unpunished attacks on activists and journalists, as well as targeted disinformation campaigns, are spreading worldwide. The COVID-19 pandemic is unfortunately only accelerating negative trends in this regard. The negative development only underscores an urgent need to launch a complex engagement of the Media Freedom Coalition. We are pleased to contribute to defending media freedom with the following commitments. By becoming a new member of the executive group, the Czech Republic is stepping up its active engagement within the coalition. We will continue our support for independent journalists and other engaged voices, both online and offline, by speaking out on their behalf on the international scene, by defending journalists at risk, and also by providing emergency visa to those in danger. We will use our diplomatic network as well as close contacts with civil society and media outlets themselves. For the 4th year in a row, we will once again earmark a voluntary contribution to the UNESCO Global Media Defense Fund. Here, I would like to thank the fund for the important work on enhancing journalists' legal protection and improving media freedom. We will also continue to provide financial contribution to the Digital Defense Partnership Program initiated by the Freedom Online Coalition. Media freedom will also feature among the Czech priorities during the upcoming EU presidency in the second half of this year. Nationally, the Czech Republic will continue its direct project support with the Transition Promotion Programme, an indispensable part of our foreign policy and development cooperation for the past 16 years already. Using our own experience with the social transition and democratization of the country, we will be working closely with civil society and independent media to support human rights and strengthen democracy and the rule of law in the countries such as Belarus, Myanmar, or Cuba. We will continue close cooperation with independent media outlets such as the Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, including by providing funding for Václav Havel and Jiří Dinsbír journalism fellowship programs. As in the case of Ilhara Losik, our common aim remains to support aspiring independent journalists in the Eastern Partnership countries, Russia and Western Balkans. On behalf of the Czech government, let me renew our commitment to the global pledge on media freedom. Fully aware of the challenges ahead, this task doesn't stop at our borders. At home, we are equally committed to ensuring independence of the Czech public media through sustainable financing and protection from political influence. Clear accountability for attacks against journalists is what we need. Therefore, our government will approve a national sanction legislation, Magnitsky Act, if you will, by the end of the next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Czech Republic. I would now like to turn to Lithuania and the Vice Minister from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency, Mr. Arnoldas Prankievičius, please.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, dear Secretary General. Ladies and gentlemen, great pleasure to be in Tallinn, in Estonia, and kudos once again to Estonia for organizing this absolutely wonderful and very successful conference and for bringing together so many activists and fighters for media freedom and human rights globally. It is my pleasure to present to you Lithuania's commitments. First, we pledge to work with the international community and like-minded partners to achieve greater support for media freedom. As an active member of the groups of Friends of Safety for Journalists, Freedom Online Coalition, and other international initiatives, we commit to use our seat at the UN Human Rights Council to actively engage in defending media freedom, freedom of expression, and the safety of journalists. Through the Media Freedom Coalition, we will speak out and take action together to defend media freedom. We will further work to advocate for media freedom where it is at risk and to show solidarity with countries that work to build media freedom. Secondly, we commit to counter threats to media freedom and promote the safety of journalists. Lithuania is committed to the indicated need by the high-level panel of legal experts on media freedom to strengthen relevant international evidence gathering and accountability mechanisms. We pledge to work for this cause and contribute to the international community's efforts to combat impunity. We will continue, as we have done until now, to provide practical assistance to journalists and media workers, especially for those suffering from persecution by authoritarian regimes. We will further support the people of Belarus, including political prisoners, persecuted and unjustly jailed journalists, advocating for their immediate and unconditional release. Through Media Freedom Coalition, we will make sure that their voices and voices of all journalists around the globe are heard. And third, lastly, we share a strong commitment to take an active part in tackling disinformation, which poses numerous threats to democratic societies and free media. Partnering with civil society, media organizations, and journalists, we will further build resilience and trust in quality independent media. We will do that by boosting media literacy, raising civic awareness through supporting programs such as media education, awareness campaigns, counter-disinformation training for journalists and civil society. We will also contribute to the EU-level initiatives, such as developing a toolbox for countering foreign interference and disinformation, the upcoming Digital Services Act, and the renewed Code of Practice on Disinformation. Lithuania is committed to ensuring a robust sharing of data and best practices. We will continue to be an active member of the Rapid Alert System of the European Union, to cooperate with the EU institutions and member states, with G7 and NATO partners. We will further work on the instrument's development for it to live up to its objectives. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Arnoldas. Thank you, Lithuania. I would now like to turn to Germany and Her Excellency Ms. Luise Amtsberg, the Human Rights Commissioner. Please.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. Germany has been deeply committed to promote media freedom and the protection of journalists in the past, and of course will continue this support in the future. Since 2014, media freedom has a dedicated budget title in the German federal budget, with now more than 40 million euros per year. We have doubled up our contribution for the Media Defense Fund in 2021 compared to the year before. Of course, we look forward to continuing this support in the future. Furthermore, our support to human rights defenders, journalists, and other activists at risk will expand. With the Elisabeth Selbert Initiative for Human Rights Defenders, we launched an initiative that creates temporary safe residence opportunities for journalists under pressure. Ladies and gentlemen, the spread of misinformation during the COVID-19 pandemic has revealed once more that independent, pluralistic, and fact-based journalism is paramount. Authoritarian regimes are using the fight against the virus as a welcome excuse to silence critical journalists. Especially women journalists are facing more digital attacks, abuse, and hate speech on social media and also physically. That is why our new Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, is dedicating German foreign policy to a feminist foreign policy, to make women and the specific threats they have to face visible and heard, to protect those who are the first affected by restrictions, repression, and violence. Ladies and gentlemen, as part of the German government, I want to be honest. We, Germany, needs to look at improvements to the situation in our country too. Our new government agreed and is working on strengthening diversity and accessibility in the media landscape. The coalition agreement also empowers independent journalism to criticize and question government action. That is why we will enhance the legal right of journalists to have access to information from federal authorities. We believe that defending media freedom must happen in our external affairs, but also domestically. In that way, we will take into account the recommendations of the independent evaluation report, which we have heard yesterday, for example, on the issues of accountability and transparency of the Media Freedom Coalition. And together with our partners in the Media Freedom Coalition, we will continue to strive for making a concrete difference for journalists at risk and to improve their situation. Thanks.
Thank you, Germany. Allow me to now turn to Slovakia. Mr. Peter Burian, Ambassador at Large for Human Rights, please.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm joining other colleagues really in thanking Estonia, our colleagues, for a great hospitality. And also at the outset, I wish to commend our Estonian colleagues for including this very important pledging event into the program of the conference to generate very concrete, tangible commitments and outcomes of this conference. And I fully agree with the previous speakers that the speeches only will not do the job. So we believe our common efforts as members of Media Freedom Coalition can make a great difference in promoting and defending media freedom around the world while upholding, and it's very important to do our homework, upholding the highest standards in this area at home. To this end, the Slovak government has undertaken several steps and initiatives in different areas to support free media and protect journalists and media workers at home and abroad. These commitments are in detail described in our written commitments for the Summit of Democracy, but let me highlight a couple of them. At home, Slovakia will enshrine protection of journalists in several media-related laws, including measures to increase personal security and reinforce safeguards against abuse in defamation cases. And these legislation, these laws are now being discussed in the Parliament, and I believe also will reflect many important recommendations which were presented by the panel of experts and in the discussion over these 2 days. Second, we want to be active on these matters also in the European Union, and in this regard we welcome and support the proposal of the European Commission to launch the preparation of a comprehensive EU Media Freedom Act, and we want to be an active participant and contributor in the upcoming legislative process, also including public consultations involving civil society into this exercise. We also will be an active contributor to the Team Europe Democracy initiative with particular focus on freedom of expression and free media as key pillars of democracy. And finally, on the global level, as part of the implementation of the recently adopted concept paper on human rights and democracy promotion, Slovakia wants in its foreign policy and development cooperation to give important priority to issues of media freedom and the protection of journalists, including through our active engagement in this coalition, Media Freedom Coalition. Support for UNESCO Global Media Fund will be allocating 30,000 euros for supporting the work of this fund, and this year will also contribute to the Council of Europe platform to promote the protection of journalism and safety of journalists by allocating 10,000 euros. Maybe we cannot contribute too much money into the process, but as it was mentioned by Czech Deputy Minister, we have something very precious, and it's our recent experience from our transformation processes, both mistakes, positive experiences, but also very sad stories as killing the journalists. Actually will be commemorating the anniversary on 20th of February of killing investigative journalist Mr. Kuciak. And we want to share this positive and also bitter experiences also through our programs of development cooperation. We have just launched 3 pilot projects worth of 10,000 euros to support strengthening of independent media in Ukraine, Moldova and Montenegro, where these aspects, namely, will be reflected, and will continue supporting independent journalists and bloggers in Belarus. And last but not least, already this year, also somehow commemorating the death of investigative journalist Kuciak, we will be allocating 300,000 euros to support organized crime and corruption reporting project You know, it's a long-term flagship project for supporting investigative journalism, which has exposed several major corruption schemes around the world. So these are concrete pledges, but once again, you will find more details also on the website of the Summit for Democracy, but it's very important to implement them in reality, in practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Slovakia. I would now like to turn to Sweden. Her Excellency, Ms. Cecilia Rudström-Ruin, the Ambassador for Human Rights and Democracy.
Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, a big thank you to Lithuania. Sorry, I've been ambassador to Lithuania. It's close to my heart.
Lithuania.
Very, very, very sorry. A very big thank you to Estonia for your impressive leadership in this regard. Sweden has a very long tradition of working to strengthen media freedom. It is a key component of our foreign policy initiative, which we call Drive for Democracy. It is a top priority in our development cooperation. It was a top priority as we last year held the chairpersonship of the OSCE. In UNESCO, Sweden has the honor of chairing the Council of the International Programme for the Development of Communication. But as democratic backsliding continues, as restrictions on media freedom increase and attacks on journalists rise, we all need to do more. We all need to do better. We need to do work at home. The Swedish government is this year taking new initiatives, strengthening capacity to prevent and handle harassment and threats against journalism, including raising awareness of how female and male journalists are affected differently. We all need also better strengthened, joint and coordinated efforts. These are more important than ever, and I was very pleased that my Foreign Minister, Ann Linde, announced yesterday that Sweden has submitted its request for membership in the Media Freedom Coalition. We look forward to collaborating with other member states of the coalition to accelerate our efforts. Resources have been a theme, and let me ensure you that Sweden pledges to continue to contribute financially to media freedom. And I would like to mention some of the existing partnerships that we will build on. Among those is the normative and operative work of UNESCO, with a goal to create conditions for free and independent media and safety for journalists. Access Now, in their work for enjoyment of human rights online, to increase security and civic space online for persons and groups in vulnerable situations. Article 19, in their mission to safeguard and strengthen the democratic space. We also support the OSCE representative for freedom of the media, Internews, APC, One IFRA, PEN International, Reporters Without Borders, and IMS. We also support media funds, such as the Media Development Investment Fund, and we are just in the process of finalizing a contribution to the start-up of the Secretariat of the International Fund for Public Interest Media, which we heard earlier in the panel. We are also providing support through our bilateral development cooperation in many different country contexts. I will not name all, but some countries that has recently benefited are Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, and Ukraine. Finally, Sweden is committed to continue to be a strong voice for media freedom and to work together with other members of the MFC in this endeavor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sweden. I would now...
And I apologize again for Lithuania, but we are all...
No worries. We're thanking Lithuania as well. Lithuania made a very important pledge. We're thanking Lithuania as well. Which brings us to Latvia. Allow me to please introduce His Excellency, Mr. Viktor Makarovs, the Special Envoy on Digital Issues from their Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's indeed a pleasure to be an in-between and a mediator between two important neighboring countries, Estonia and Lithuania, but we are all friends, of course, and with Sweden. And I would like to start by thanking our host, Estonia, for organizing this important event in such an excellent manner. I will start with a pledge that is not actually a pledge, but a standing international commitment of Latvia. We are number 22 on the World Press Freedom Index, and of course, this is no reason for complacency, so our pledge to you is that we will continue our efforts at home, focusing on ensuring that we have a pluralistic and viable media environment in Latvia that serves all segments of society. We will also continue supporting the efforts on the EU level already mentioned here, part of the European Democracy Action Plan and the work on the EU Media Freedom Act. But let me focus on our international efforts, and here I feel I speak not just on behalf of the government, but also on behalf of the Latvian civil society that is actually a major partner in our international efforts. But we will, of course, continue focusing on media freedom in multilateral fora. We are planning to advance media freedom as a priority for Latvia's candidacy for the United Nations Security Council, and this will also be a major theme in the forthcoming presidency of the Council of Europe. We will continue to contribute to various international formats of like-minded countries, and Media Freedom Coalition is absolutely number one on this list. But we'll also work in other formats focused on protection of journalists and media professionals within the UN in Geneva and New York, as well as within the UNESCO and OSCE formats. Latvia has been a long-standing member of the UNESCO International Council for the Development of Communications, and Latvian experts, members of the Council, strongly advocate for freedom of expression, protection of the safety of journalists and quality journalism, and they will continue to put their expertise and practical knowledge at the disposal of UNESCO. Just as importantly, we provide practical support and funding for the media freedom and safety of journalists' efforts, focusing on the region close to us, especially the Eastern Partnership. So together with the United Kingdom, Latvia initiated and chairs the Eastern Partnership Media Donors Coordination Group. Protecting freedom of media starts with helping independent media achieve and sustain professional strength and economic viability. So the group provides media donors with information and insights that help to work towards these goals. We will continue chairing and supporting the work of this group together with our British colleagues. We will continue working with civil society partners and professional media advocacy groups to provide emergency support to journalists from Belarus who have suffered from repressions for reporting during the presidential election and the following protests. Latvia contributes financial resources and implements practical support for journalists and civil society including through the contributions to the Global Media Protection Fund, and we have also supported financially the work of the European Endowment for Democracy. The endowment works to assist independent media and journalists in the EU neighborhood. We will continue making voluntary contributions of this kind and also make development cooperation funding available for NGO engaged in media support projects. And finally, I would like to say that Latvia has become a safe haven for journalists and media from countries where freedom of expression and media are suppressed. Some of the leading Russian independent media, such as Meduza, iStories, and others, work from Riga. Latvia will continue to be a welcoming place and indeed an advocate for independent media in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Latvia. And for the last live statement, allow me to turn to His Excellency Mr. Martin Michelet, the Ambassador of Switzerland to Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. Please, Ambassador.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Switzerland is strongly committed to the respect of freedom of expression and opinion, regardless of borders and whether it happens online or offline. A functioning democracy needs a strong, pluralistic and independent media ecosystem. Without a functioning media, there is no meaningful debate and there is no democracy. Guaranteeing the right to freedom of expression is the responsibility of states. Government must strengthen their role in coordinating with the private sector and civil society to foster the freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and combat disinformation in accordance with the rule of law. We are therefore pleased to announce that Switzerland will support the International Fund for Public Interest Media with $2 million. In our view, it is key to promote media also in low and middle-income countries in order to ensure access to trustworthy information to all citizens, in particular also the poor and disenfranchised. Another priority of the Swiss engagement is the protection of journalists. Hundreds of media representative journalists and bloggers are imprisoned because of their work. Contribution to their protection and fostering access to legal assistance are key for a free and pluralistic media ecosystem. We are therefore glad to support the UNESCO Global Media Defense Fund with a $250,000 contribution. The fund has an important role to play to bolster journalists' legal protection and enhance media freedom. Switzerland is also one of the main supporters of the second phase of the OSCE Safety of Female Journalists online project that puts a special focus on the protection of female media workers. Last but not least, we also want to improve the situation at national level. Switzerland is therefore currently drafting a national action plan for the safety of journalists. Before closing, Mr. Chair, I would like to express the deep gratitude of the Swiss government to the government of Estonia for the perfect hosting of this important meeting and a warm welcome here in beautiful Tallinn. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Switzerland. We had planned to show you the video recordings from a number of countries that have also made pledges, but we are in a bit of a time problem. Let me just mention the countries that have already made pledges via video that are accessible through our website. We have pledges from foreign ministers of Austria, Canada, North Macedonia, Estonia, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Italy, and Norway. If any of you are now inspired by the pledges you heard, you can turn to our colleagues or my colleagues standing there who can help you with preparing a video that we would then, with your pledge, that we would then upload on our webpage. And as a surprise to the production crew, I would now like to invite the last physical speaker to the stage from Kosovo, Her Excellency Donika Gervala-Schwarz. Please.
Thank you very much. The Republic of Kosovo, whom I have the privilege to serve as a foreign minister, is a small but very proud country in the heart of Europe. The new role of Kosovo is very new for us because we were sitting in the past always on the side of those who have profited so much from international solidarity. And now, 22 years after the war, it is for us, we are very happy to try step by step to go to the side of the contributors. So I would like to pledge today in the name of the Republic of Kosovo to give 3 pledges. The first one, we would offer to organize in coordination with this committee a conference in our country where we could bring together frontline reporters and politicians. Why that? Because 1998 and 1999, as Kosovo was suffering in a brutal war and genocide, there was these reporters, these frontline reporters, who showed all the world that this country needs to be saved. And action has followed, and now the Republic of Kosovo is an independent and sovereign state and making progress day by day. The second pledge is about giving protection and host to journalists, but not only them, to media, serious media, who are no more able to work in their hometowns and who need to go for a short period or a long period somewhere else. We have a very good internet infrastructure, and we think that Kosovo is the right place to be there and to work from there. And my third pledge is about offering the Secretary, because Kosovo is not only the youngest country, the newest country, but we have the youngest population in Europe and a very skilled in ICT population. So we would offer to help in everything what has to do with internet presence, advertisement, and everything what could be helpful in that regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kosovo. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard inspiring speeches, concrete recommendations, and now concrete pledges. There are more concrete pledges on the website. There is hope on the horizon. Let's keep up the good work. Thank you.